Hello, dear ones. It's so nice to have you join me today. My name is Sarah Lustig. I am a licensed therapist and a spiritual coach and healer. I am so glad to have you here today as I'm talking about this really important topic of how I healed my childhood trauma. And it's important to keep in mind there are lots of different ways that we can heal our trauma. There are lots of different techniques that are going to work for different people. So knowing that what I share today is what worked for me, and you can take the kind of golden nuggets and wisdom for yourself that apply and resonate for you, and leave anything that doesn't apply or that doesn't fit for you in your life. So I want to just kind of start to talk about this idea of childhood trauma and what that even really is and what that means. So first of all, childhood trauma is developmental trauma. This is, trauma that takes place as we are developing. As our brains are developing, our bodies are developing, our hormones, our minds. So this kind of trauma can take place in the womb while a baby is being, being born and, growing and developing in that space. But it also takes place, primarily from birth to age 7. That's when we are the most kind of developmentally sponges in the world and just kind of absorbing everything that is taking place in the world. And so we want to just kind of be aware of, in particular, the experiences that happened from, what happened in the womb or what mom might have experienced as she was pregnant to, around age 12. Like, those things are really important for developmental years and milestones. And so developmental trauma is trauma that happens during this time. Typically, it is also related to relational trauma, and this is trauma that happens in relationships with other people. And so if our trauma took place at home with our parents or our caregivers, then we're also going to have had experience with relational trauma. And this means it's going to be sometimes confusing how we relate to people, where we might have a kind of desire to connect and to feel close to them, but we might also be overwhelmed by that when we start to get close because we're taking on those emotions, and you recognize you're really becoming enmeshed with this person. And so there's this kind of confusion in relationships, especially for deeply feeling sensitive women. And so just kind of understanding developmental trauma and relational trauma and how that really impacts us in childhood and how that affects the development of the brain, of the body, of how we understand ourselves in relationship to ourselves, to our families and our friends, our teachers, the world around us. That kind of those different levels of how we relate to others. For me, I was a very sensitive child, and I was a very gifted child. I was very intelligent. I was, put into the gifted program and transferred schools in 4th grade because in 3rd grade I was starting to get in trouble in school because I was bored and I was finishing things very quickly, and I was not, being stimulated enough in school. The learning that was taking place wasn't enough for me. And so I started getting in trouble. And, that probably contributed to my trauma in ways at home in which, my highly attunement to my parents, to the environment, definitely led to, parents' anger, to, different emotions being present in the household. One of the ways that we study childhood trauma is through the Adverse Childhood Experiences test, known as the ACE test. And my ACE score is a 9 out of 10. 10 is the highest that it can be. So, I experienced a lot of different kinds of trauma growing up. Emotional trauma, physical abuse, neglect, sexual assault. My mom passed away when I was 18. So there was a lot of trauma going on in my house. And sometimes people are really surprised by what even makes trauma, like what even defines trauma. And so growing up in these kind of dysfunctional, chaotic households is one of the things that adds to developmental trauma and relational trauma. Having parents who are very either emotionally overwhelming, in which they're kind of dumping their emotions or their feelings onto their children, or they're very emotionally distant and disconnected and completely suppressing their emotions, completely shut off from their emotions, and teach their children that having emotions is not healthy. Both of these teach children that having emotions is not healthy, whether we're having explosive emotions that cannot be managed, or we're suppressing emotions and we're completely pushing them down and not allowing them to be properly expressed. So we can, this is how trauma shows up with our emotions. This is just one way that trauma can take place in childhood. Trying to caretake or having to caretake parents or yourself regularly before the age of 12, or siblings. Growing up having to kind of cook meals for yourself, or do chores by yourself around the house. Different traumas around communication, how people communicated to you, what was communicated to you, whether parents were communicating too much to you and telling you things that children just developmentally don't have the capacity to make sense of or understand. So for me, all of those things were taking place. Being highly sensitive, I was also very overwhelmed by sound and loud noises. That was a big part of my childhood home, is lots of fights and lots of yelling and angry tempers, breaking things. So being in that environment was very taxing on me emotionally. I became highly afraid, highly anxious, highly depressed, struggled with anxiety and depression deeply for over 2 decades. These things, although they were extremely challenging growing up, they're also what fueled me to become a therapist and to go that route, to understand myself better. As a result of the traumas that I faced, I really learned to become a chameleon and really blend into my environment in order to be safe. I learned to very slowly enter environments and really be aware of the dynamics that were present in those environments before I really started to show myself in those environments. So, children with lots of childhood trauma learn to blend in, and they learn to be invisible, and they learn to camouflage themselves in other people and kind of take on the personalities or characteristics of other people in order to feel safe themselves, in order to, feel like this person is going to be okay with me because I'm like them too. And so this can create behaviors of being afraid to speak up, afraid to ask for help, being afraid to reach out for other people to support us, or trusting that they will be able to. One of the ways that we do this too is kind of, suppressing our power. And that was definitely true of me, that I would often, kind of downplay my power or minimize it as much as possible in order to not threaten the people around me. Being a highly gifted child and recognizing that I was aware of a lot more than what other people were aware of around me, it meant that when I brought things up to my parents, there was explosive responses and reactions to that. So I learned, okay, I don't want those things to be known, and to downplay those things, and to play small and pretend like I didn't know what was going on, and play ignorant and play kind of dumb in ways, or roll over and play an opossum role, where it's like that I'm not a threat at all because look how harmless I am to you. And so these are the different ways that women can really embody these wounded, victimized roles in childhood. And so learning, how these show up and how these behaviors manifest in the root of them is so important for how we then start to heal them. And that's what I want to get to next. So, like I mentioned, these experiences helped me ultimately become a therapist and become the healer that I am. And so I'm grateful for them. And truly, if I had to go back and do it all again, there was some things I'd probably do differently myself, but everything that happened to me, I understand. I understand why those things happened, and I have come to a place of complete peace with all of those things. And that's the power of the work that I do with women, and helping them heal from these wounds and conditions and patterns that were ultimately passed down to them from their parents. And so recognizing how these patterns show up. And for me, one of those ways was really buying into this victim story of I'm too fucked up, or I'm too messed up, and I'm never going to be able to kind of be the healer or the leader that I want in the world because I've been through these experiences. And it wasn't until I learned about the idea of the wounded healer that I understood that's not the case, that actually having gone through these experiences makes me a better healer in so many ways, makes me more qualified to understand the pain of other people and to be able to hold space for their pain fully and completely without judgment of it, which is beautiful, beautiful gifts to hold in the world. And so being able to understand. And while that's not one of the ways that I want to really focus on today, I just wanted to kind of make that point, that understanding these things and being able to make sense of them is part of the journey. So what really were some of the crucial pieces for me in helping me finally heal from my childhood trauma? The first one is focusing on myself. Growing up in the childhood home that I did, it meant really caretaking everybody else's feelings all the time so that I could try to keep them safe and keep them happy, which would ultimately help me feel safer and help me feel like things were okay. So, recognizing how that pattern played out and, really like switching that and learning how to focus just on myself. Learning how to start to tune out what other people wanted and needed, especially from me, and learning to really focus on what I needed for the first time in my life. And that was really, really challenging to do. And this is very uncomfortable to do at first when you are so used to tuning into everybody else's feelings and what they are going through and their pain points, and actually learning how to attune to your own at first is very uncomfortable. So one of the ways that we can do this is by seeing ourselves outside of ourselves and pulling ourselves out and being kind of the observer, looking at ourselves from kind of a higher perspective, almost imagining that you're in a hot air balloon looking down on your life and seeing from this bigger perspective of what might be playing out and what is the wisdom that is showing up in the moment, or what is the wisdom that you can take from the past and take these things to be able to make sense of them or shift your perspective in order to have a more peaceful and loving relationship with yourself or the things that you experienced in the past. Part of focusing on myself also meant disconnecting from how other people were going to perceive that, how other people might judge me for focusing on myself and focusing on my journey and what I needed to heal. One of the things that ultimately helped me a great deal with that was recognizing that I would not and could not be the healer that I wanted to be in the world if I did not choose myself first. If I continued to choose other people and put my time and energy into my family and trying to rescue and fix them, I was never going to be what I needed to be in order to be what my future clients and the people that I was going to work with and serve needed me to be. And that was really important to me, to be able to show up as the healer with integrity that I needed to be, and know that I wasn't going to show up as a wounded healer. I wasn't going to continue to perpetuate wounds on other people because I was still acting from my wounded place. And this is something that is really important to talk about for being in healing spaces, because there are so many healers out there trying to hold space when they're not ready to yet, when they have not done their own inner work enough to be able to hold the fullness of other people's experiences, and they're actually doing incredible harm and damage that takes people then more time and more money and energy to heal. And not only that, it makes them question themselves and feel like they can't trust themselves, which is so heartbreaking to me. So they're trying to go for healing and they're actually being more traumatized. So anyway, I could get off topic and speak about that on quite a tangent, but I won't. I will stay focused. But it is a real problem, and it is something that we do want to address and just be aware of, that whoever you see for your healing, you want to make sure that they have also done their own healing work, that they can truly be trusted to hold space for you, and not all healers can. So the next kind of point that I want to focus on that was really helpful for me in healing my own childhood trauma was looking at the friendships and the relationships that I had in my life and understanding which ones were not good for my mental health, which ones were not benefiting to me being the version of myself that I wanted to be and that I was trying to become. looking at the relationships that were hurting me and holding me back. And not that those people were bad, not that those friendships were, malicious on purpose, or that I have any ill intention or will towards those people. There's no judgment, but just recognizing that they were at different states and they were at different places in their life, and how that was then manifesting for us was creating wounds, was creating sometimes trauma bonds. And so being really aware of those relationships and recognizing that not all people in our life want to see us thrive. Not all people in our life want to see us doing well. And it's not because they have malicious intent. It's not because they're mean, evil, bad people. It's simply because, they are wounded themselves and they're not aware of it. They're not conscious of it. They are, playing out their own wounded cycles that they don't realize because they were also normalized in their upbringing and their childhood development. And they don't realize yet that those things are wounded, or maybe they're starting to realize, but trying to move towards them, to work on them, is actually scary or overwhelming, or just too threatening for them right now. And recognizing that different people are on different timelines for their healing, and we don't need to compare our timeline with other people's timeline, trusting that it's okay for us to go our separate ways. Some people are in our life for a long time, and that's beautiful. And some people are in our life for a short time, and that's also beautiful. And knowing that that's okay. And it doesn't mean that we have to stop loving those people. We can love them sometimes even more with distance between us. Knowing that those people ultimately get to be the best versions of themselves, and they don't have to shrink or stay small to appease us and to fit into our expectations of who we think they should be, and vice versa, that we don't have to fit into their expectations of who they think that we should be. Recognizing sometimes that misery does love company, and that people can try to keep us stuck in those places because they don't want to be alone. And it's not because they're trying to keep us from growing or expanding. So just being able to recognize those relationships and how they might be impacting you, or how you might need to shift some of those relationships. And again, not that you don't love those people, but it just might be that they're not working in your life anymore for the version of yourself that you're trying to create, that more healed version who is able to thrive, who is able to show up as her fierce, strong self in the world. And then the last thing that really helped me heal my trauma was learning how to trust myself again. Learning how to focus on me having the answer. And this was really hard at first because, when you are a child in those situations, experiencing situations that don't feel safe, you're looking to the adults to understand what's going on and what is the answer and why is this happening. And so we learn very much, especially in our society, to value external advice, external support, more than we value our internal wisdom, more than we value what our intuition is telling us, more than we value what our gut and what our heart is saying and how they are speaking to us. And so this is a really important part of healing childhood trauma, is learning how to trust yourself again. And it makes sense that you might not trust yourself because you have at times, because of your beautiful, sensitive, loving heart, put yourself in situations that your intuition might have been telling you was bad for you, but you didn't listen because you didn't know how to listen, or you didn't know how to take the proper action to get yourself out of those situations. And so there might be shame. There might be feelings of guilt of how you may have let yourself down in the past, or how you might have, caused yourself more pain because of things that you did. And so just acknowledging if that's true, but not making yourself wrong or bad for that, and knowing that you're learning, that you're on this constant journey of trying to be better and trying to learn more about who you are. And the more you learn, it's to make more aligned decisions for yourself. You're not learning those things to then go back to past selves and beat yourself up for how you behaved when you didn't know those things. So learning how to trust again, not immediately going to friends or family, assuming that they know what's best for you, assuming that they have a better answer for you, assuming that they are going to give you advice that's going to be better for you than the advice that your greatest self, your soul wisdom, has for you. Learning how to go inward, learning how to listen to how your body is communicating to you, learning how to listen to how your heart communicates to you, how your intuition speaks to you, learning how to quiet the kind of screaming of the ego and the fear that tries to keep you safe, not making it bad, understanding it's literally trying to keep you alive and trying to keep you safe, but understanding how those things communicate with you so that you can ultimately choose from an empowered place which voice you want to listen to, which voice is representing truth in the moment and not fear or illusion or scarcity mindset or trauma-based reactions, trauma-based triggers from the past that are not applicable for your present and who you are now. So learning how to trust yourself and how important this is on your journey. And all of this really comes down to relearning who you are, relearning how to show up for yourself, relearning how to take care of yourself, relearning what your needs are, how to communicate those needs. As you heal and you go through this process of becoming more you, you also go through a process of becoming all the things that are not you. And it's really relearning. And that's the work that I do with the women that I see, is helping them reparent themselves from the wounds that they experienced in childhood through developmental trauma, through relational trauma. And again, this doesn't have to look like physical abuse or sexual abuse, although it might. It's more about the connection that you had and the trauma that was created and how that impacted your brain, your body, your beliefs about yourself, your ideas of who you are in the world and the value that you are worthy of or that you are as a person, as a woman. So, being able to understand that what we sometimes think as trauma isn't necessarily the same thing as what actually is trauma. And that having a parent that you had to take care of, or having a parent who had their own mental health issues, who dealt with addiction, a parent who was very chaotic, that you didn't know what you were going to expect with them. Those are experiences of developmental and relational trauma that you want to be aware of. And understanding how those were really impacting me as I went to grad school and became a therapist helped me then become a better healer and heal my childhood trauma. So, being able to explore yourself in these ways and explore your upbringing from this new lens, understanding that what you went through wasn't about you being bad or you needing to be perfect. It was about there is wisdom in there, and it's just understanding how these are cycles that are passed down through our parents' wounding and through generational trauma and the things that they experienced, and being able to have more grace for ourselves and them for what they experienced. So, if this is work that you are interested in, it's such beautiful and sacred work. I am starting Golden Soul Academy. This is a beautiful program in which we really alchemize emotions and we look at the past from this new lens, where we create a new foundation that is heart-centered, where we bring a really strength-based lens and perspective to the things that you experienced. And we do this in a group healing dynamic, which that alone creates such beautiful transformations when women come together for their healing. So if this is something that you are interested in, applications just opened yesterday. So check out the link in my bio to learn more. I'm so excited to start this program and to have women come together in this way and share this space with you all. Healing from my childhood trauma, although it has been, tumultuous so many times, and it's not easy. It's absolutely not easy to go through these experiences and to heal from them, but it is absolutely possible. I know I spent over a decade doing it. I spent doing it so often alone and doing it the hard way. And I know that it doesn't have to be that hard. And that's why I love doing this work and being able to hold space for women together to really help them see they're not alone in their pain. and that it is possible to heal from these things. And so just to know that that is absolutely true for you. And I'm so glad that you're here with me in this moment, in this space, whether you watched live or whether you catch the replay. I'm so honored to have shared this space with you, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you so much.